Is this safe to eat? We sometimes see strange dots on our potatoes and wonder if we should just throw them away. Here are 10 eat or toss facts. Did you know that every year 119 billion pounds of food is wasted only in the United States? To put it in perspective, this number means nearly 40% of all food in America is wasted. People throw away food if they don't have confidence in the ingredients. They're being cautious, and it makes sense. But what if the food is safe to eat and only looks weird? The first item on the list is beef. When it comes to meat, people naturally get extra cautious. Imagine you buy some raw beef in the store. Later on, you realize it's got some brown spots. If you toss it immediately, hear me out. This is normal. In fact, you can see brown layers also inside the beef. Bright red color equals fresh meat, huh? Not necessarily. When the meat is first cut, it's maroon. If the meat is quickly vacuum packaged, it will keep that shade. But if the meat is exposed to air for like 15 minutes, then oxygen will cause a change in the look to red. The redness can turn brown when the biochemical reaction starts. This can take a few hours. Workers at the grocery stores grind the meat several times a day to achieve that bright red color because they know consumers are cautious about maroon-looking beef. If the beef is wrapped in an oxygen-permeable plastic, it turns bright red after exposure to oxygen. As long as the meat smells and feels fresh, and if it's been stored properly, it should be safe to eat. Have you ever come across dark lines under a shrimp shell? This one has a similar story to beef. Black lines on your shrimp's flesh are related to a natural phenomenon. They gradually occur after shrimps are taken from the water. Meat is exposed to oxygen, and the blackness gets more visible over time. Here also, the pattern of the animal itself can be a factor. These black lines can be a naturally occurring discoloration on the shrimp. Think of cats. They also have different color patterns, but they're the same in terms of species. Next time, you can conduct a mini experiment in your kitchen. Put a couple of shrimp side by side and observe the mild differences in the shrimp's color patterns. Shrimp will have a distinct bad odor when it's no longer edible, so if it smells and tastes fresh, don't toss it. Should you eat moldy yogurt? That green substance on the surface doesn't look appealing at all. But if you scoop it out, you seem to have clean yogurt underneath. The short answer is toss it. The mold could be seen on the top only, but it has probably gone deep. Not to mention that it'll taste bad. Many molds are harmless, but some produce toxic substances. Green mold is a type of penicillium. Does this word sound familiar? That's the same type of mold used in the antibiotic penicillin. Don't get too excited. Eating moldy yogurt won't magically cure bacterial infections. It only spoils your dairy product. In 2013, there was an outbreak related to one line of yogurts. The company handed the products to stores as usual. After some time, they received customer complaints. They said that the yogurt looked like yogurt soup and tasted really old. Turns out that a type of fungus probably released some carbon dioxide. It made the product fizzy and bloating. Ugh. The company and another independent scientist both said that this fungus in question wasn't usually harmful to people. Yet, more than 200 people reported becoming affected by it. So, these sorts of things can still happen. You should trust your spidey sense. If you've ever been lucky enough to see some mold in a freshly opened package, reach out to the manufacturer. You'll potentially save others from facing the same scenery by notifying the company about a systemic issue and preventing potential future product waste. Plus, the company probably wants to make amends and either reimburse your sad yogurt with a happy one, or better, they'll give you coupons for free products. Why do avocados sometimes have brown dots inside? Technically, it's edible, but you might not want to eat it. Avocados are a source of many vitamins like C, E, K, and B6, as well as healthy stuff like magnesium, potassium, and more. The avocado works hard to become such a health storage. Nutrients, water, and sugars wander around this fruit. Yes, technically, avocado is classified as a fruit. Anyway, avocados have their own transport channels, like veins. These channels are normally invisible to us. Until something goes out of the ordinary, the avocado may be stored in too cold temperatures for a longer time than it should. As a result, the tissue cells might be weakened and start to deteriorate. Experts say that after the fruit is harvested, if it stays in the refrigerator for a few weeks before you buy it, vascular browning can occur. This phenomenon becomes visible after you keep the avocado at room temperature for a few days. Don't be hard on yourself, it's not because of you. So, should you eat it or toss it? You can eat the brown dotted avocados, but you may want to taste them first. They might not taste good compared to a regular one. What about the white area under the potato peel? Eat or toss? This area is also like dark bruise marks, but it's not black. If the outer layer of the potato looks normal, that odd-looking white knot is not mold. The moldy potatoes deteriorate. They'll get softer, wrinkled, or squishy. As long as the exterior of this potato appears clean and regular, there's probably no harmful microbial growth inside of it. These strikingly white areas can be shaped due to potatoes being bruised, possibly in the field during the harvesting period. To sum up, you can eat it. There's also an issue of white smears coming out when we slice potatoes. You see the marks on the cutting board? Experts say that some potatoes have a higher level of water and starch content. As a result, your cutting board gets a bit messier than usual. No need to worry about it. I'm going to carry on with another form of potato. Not because I love every version of potato and I can eat it in all meals from breakfast to dinner, but because I want to know, what are those brown spots on potato chips? Should we eat or toss them? Consider these as minor imperfections. They don't affect the safety of the chip. They're there again because of the bruises they get or as a result of frying. Sometimes you see that your garlic is trying to make more garlic out of itself. Yep, it has sprouted. The question is it okay to eat sprouted cloves, or should you toss them? If the green sprout is in the center of the garlic clove, that's fine. Be aware that the taste of the garlic will be stronger than it usually is. It will still be perfectly okay in a cooked meal, since it'll be alongside other ingredients. The taste shouldn't be that harsh. Can we eat an apple with worms? Most people can't even stand the idea of accidentally eating an apple with a worm, but that's a cultural thing. So the answer is yes, we can eat it. After all, worms add a little protein to the fruit. These animals don't carry any harmful parasites. They make their way into the apple. The entrance point of the fruit might have an off flavor since it got sort of rotten in time. Besides the taste, the rotten part is all safe to bite. What might not be so safe is eating the fallen apples though. Those have probably been hanging out on the ground for quite some time. This period might be enough for the harmful bacteria from the soil to sneak into the apple. There were some cases where people experienced health issues by drinking unpasteurized apple juice made from dropped apples. Yeah, the ones that interact with unhealthy bacteria. The original Superman from comic books didn't fly. He leaped from one tall building to another in a single bound. But animators who were working on a Superman animated series in the 1940s complained that the whole leaping thing would look silly on the screen. That's how Superman got his superpower of taking off into the air. Just 20% of laughter is caused by jokes and funny situations. The rest is people reacting to questions like, "How are you doing?" and regular statements. It helps to form social bonds. People who laugh together get closer. We humans are just one of the world's 8.7 million estimated species. This number includes 611,000 mushroom mold and other fungi species, 298,000 plant species, 7.8 million animal species. You've got the idea. There are 4 main facial expressions: angry, afraid or surprised, happy, and sad. But besides these basic ones, you can create up to 7,000 more. By the way, facial expressions that are genuine are more likely to be symmetrical. The mountains on Venus are covered with a snow-like substance, but the temperatures on the planets are scorching and no snow can exist there. The frost is actually metallic. An apple is almost 20% air. That's why it floats when placed in the water. Mysterious Pacific sleeper sharks live in an underwater volcano in Kavachi. It's not far from the Solomon Islands. Scientists have to send in robots to learn more about these creatures. People can't stand the heat and acidity of that environment. The University of Oxford is older than the Aztec Empire. The educational institution was established in 1096, and the Aztec Empire was founded 332 years later, in 1428. The tardigrade, aka the water bear, is a microscopic creature that's famous for its survival skills. It can live through extreme temperatures from 300 to negative 458 degrees Fahrenheit, and a pressure that's 6 times stronger than the ocean floor. The creature can also survive in a complete vacuum. Tardigrades sometimes spend almost 10 years without food. Pluto was discovered in 1930 and lost its planetary status in 2006. Within this rather long time, it still didn't manage to make a full orbit around the Sun. The former planet needs 248 Earth years to complete its orbit. In 400 BCE, Persian engineers built an ice machine in the desert. They noticed that ice tended to appear in the shadows during the night. They started to dig holes in the clay in the shaded spots. Then they filled these holes with water. In the morning, they dug the ice out of the holes and stored it in special super-insulated constructions filled with hay. This helped the ice last even on the hottest days, and Persians always had something to help them stay cool. Those who cheated in the Olympics in ancient Greece were severely punished. They had to pay fines and could even be banned from any kind of competition. Interestingly, the fines were used to build bronze statues of those cheating athletes near the entrance of the Olympic Stadium with a description of how they had cheated. On average, a drop of water spends around 9 days in the atmosphere before it falls back to Earth. And if it ends up in the ocean, it sometimes takes more than 3,000 years before it evaporates again. John Mitchell was the first person to speculate about the existence of black holes. It happened in 1783. In his paper, he called them black stars. Unfortunately, his theory was forgotten until the 1970s. Raw sweet potatoes aren't actually sweet, but once you start heating them during cooking, a special enzyme called beta amylase breaks down the tasteless starch, turning it into sugar. The M100 galaxy is 55 million light-years away from Earth. This is a mind-boggling distance. The galaxy itself is 107,000 light-years across. It's a bit bigger than our home Milky Way galaxy. In 2006, Qatar Telecom had a charity auction where they offered a unique phone number, 666-6666. An anonymous bidder bought it for $2.7 million. Showers are famous for being able to spark creativity. When you're taking a warm shower, you usually feel relaxed and happy. Your dopamine level grows, increasing your chances of getting excellent ideas. The hashtag symbol has an official name, Octothorpe. It's a made-up word that was created in the same place where the telephone came from, Bell Laboratories. Back in the past, when there were no terabytes or even gigabytes yet, megabytes used to weigh a lot. The first computer, which was built in 1956, had a hard drive, or something similar to that. This hard drive's capacity was 5 megabytes. But the cabinet it was kept in weighed around 1 ton. Butterflies taste food with their feet because their taste sensors are there. If you were a butterfly, you could taste your pizza just by standing on it. Octopuses lay from 20,000 to 100,000 eggs at a time. The mother octopuses doesn't eat for half a year, protecting the eggs. When baby octopuses get born, they aren't bigger than rice grains. A big oak tree can drink 100 gallons of water a day, and a giant sequoia usually consumes 500 gallons daily. The inhabitants of Setenil de las Bodegas in Spain literally live under a rock. People work, study, and go for a walk beneath a huge rocky outcropping. Their homes are built right into the side of the rock. However hot it is outside, you still won't be able to cook an egg on a sidewalk. The highest sidewalk temperature can be more than 140 degrees Fahrenheit. But to cook an egg, you need at least 158 degrees Fahrenheit. Concrete is a great heat conductor, but it's not hot enough to make breakfast. There is a sea with borders defined not by land, but by ocean currents. It's the Sargasso Sea in the Atlantic Ocean, not far from Bermuda. Several currents create a large still area of salty water filled with floating seaweed. Hummingbirds are tiny creatures, but one particular species, the bee hummingbird, breaks all records. The thing is so minuscule it often gets mistaken for an insect. The bird also weighs less than a dime. Hot chocolate tastes better if you drink it out of an orange cup. Researchers asked 57 volunteers to try the same hot chocolate out of red, cream, white, and orange cups. Almost all the participants agreed that the chocolate tastes better when served in orange cups. It proved that the way something is served influences your perception of its taste. Gravity-defying geckos have millions of tiny branched hairs on their bulbous toes. This system lets geckos stick and unstick their feet at breakneck speed, scurrying across surfaces at 20 body lengths per second. It's a proven fact that when you're on the computer, you blink less. In everyday life, you blink around 20 times per minute. But when you're using a computer, it's only 7 times per minute. What's even more interesting, you also read 10% more slowly when you're looking at a computer screen or any other electronic device. African buffalo herds often make decisions by voting. For example, when they choose where to travel, animals would stand up one by one, look in a particular direction, and then lie down again. In most cases, the herd then moves in the direction that's got the most looks. One bamboo species holds the world record for being the fastest growing on Earth. It grows 35 inches per day. When some Massachusetts residents feel like playing a song or two instead of grabbing a guitar, they go for a typewriter. In 2004, the Boston Typewriter Orchestra performed for the first time. The orchestra members produced unusual music with the help of old typewriters and have already released one album. The horseshoe crab has eyes all over its body. The creature has 10 of them, some on top of the animal shell, some down on its tail, and the rest near its mouth. All these eyes help the crab get around.
If you ever want to call someone, hoping they won't really answer, try Super Bowl night. Over 100 million people are enjoying America's favorite sports finals, which is the most watched television program of the year. American football is called this way, although you play it with your hands, because it developed from 2 sports, rugby and soccer, known as football in Europe. Also, before some major changes in the rules, they both used hands and feet to play. The 1958 NFL Championship game was the first, and so far the only, NFL title game to ever end in overtime. That night, the Baltimore Colts were playing against the New York Giants. The stadium was full with 68,000 fans, and hundreds of thousands were watching it on NBC. At some point, the crowd got so wild that the NBC cable responsible for the broadcast somehow got disconnected. The game was about to be over at any moment, so they had to do something immediately. Earlier that year, the New York Times asked the producer if they had any plan B for such a scenario. He laughingly answered they'd probably have to send someone onto the field to delay the game. And that's exactly what they did. They sent their business manager to run up and down the field after the timeout. Officers were chasing him for a while, and everyone thought that was just a rowdy fan. That's how NBC saved the broadcast, missing only the first play out of the timeout. It's hard to imagine a football game without huddles. I mean those times when they all gather in a tight circle to discuss the strategy, motivate each other, or celebrate. But those huddles only became a thing in the 1890s thanks to Paul Hubbard, a hearing-impaired quarterback for Gallaudet. He didn't want the other teams to read his hand signals, so he gathered his teammates in a tight circle to protect their secrets. The 1982 Stanford Cardinal and California Golden Bears went down in history because of the play that unfolded in the final seconds. Stanford had a 20-19 lead, and there were just 4 seconds left. You'd think that's nothing, but the time was enough for Golden Bears to turn the tables. They did 5 backyard passes, and bam, final touchdown. They won 25-20. Unlike professional football balls, the balls used at college games have white stripes painted at one of the ends to make it easier to spot the ball during nighttime games. Wilson, a famous sports equipment company, has been the exclusive provider of footballs for NFL games since 1941. They now produce 4,000 footballs every day. The first American football game in history was played between Rutgers and Princeton colleges. It was popular among students, but soon became quite a rough sport. At some point, it was even banned to play football in public spaces. Walter Camp, a famous rugby player, became Yale's football team captain and saved the day. He changed the rules of the game and made it a lot as we know it today. The 20-yard line to the end zone is known as the red zone. Red was chosen for the name, as it's a warning color for the defense. Once the offense reaches this zone, they are in the best scoring position. Gridiron football is another name for the game. No fun stories here. The only reason is that the playing field does look like a gridiron used in cooking. It seems almost impossible that brothers would be coaching NFL teams that play at the Super Bowl, but it happened in 2013. Jim Harbaugh and John Harbaugh coached the San Francisco 49ers and Baltimore Ravens and stood against each other at the big game. Their parents were watching in the Superdome. John, the elder brother, won. They briefly exchanged congratulations after the game, but didn't speak for weeks after it. Both admitted that the game was emotionally super hard for them. There used to be the National Football League and the American Football League, each with its own champion, until they merged in 1970. They had to decide about the new structure and couldn't come to an agreement. And guess how they finally solved it? Well, they just dropped 5 options into a vase and took one out at random. Kansas City Chief Lamar Hunt coined the name Super Bowl as he was inspired by a toy for just 98 cents. His wife found it at a toy store in Dallas, Texas, and told him the little ball could bounce over a small house. Not everyone liked this idea, and there were even contests for a different name, but nothing has beaten the toy-inspired one. The first Super Bowl took place on January 15, 1967. The tickets were just $12 compared to the $100,000 that you'd have to pay for the VIP suite today. Yet, there were still many empty seats at Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, where it took place. They chose the location only 6 weeks before kickoff. Now it's known 3 years before the actual game. Ever since the 5th Super Bowl, they have used Roman numbers for identifying the games. It helps avoid some confusion. For example, Super Bowl 2023 would take place at the beginning of that year, but the majority of the season would have been played in 2022. The only exception was Super Bowl 50. The NFL believed naming it Super Bowl L might have lowered ticket sales. The NFL never pays any of those superstar singers that perform at halftime shows. Appearing there at the prime time brings the artists much more money in the long run, as their record sales always spike after the game. They do get money to cover the expenses they have to prepare for the show, though. It can be more than $10 million, so that's not a bad deal after all. Each Super Bowl team gets 108 balls, 54 of them serve as practice balls, and another 54 are used during the actual game. The usual halftime of the NFL game is 12 to 15 minutes, but the super halftime is 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the performance that's going on. The coin they flipped at the 44 game to decide which team would start the kickoff had spent 11 days on a NASA spaceship orbiting the Earth. To make sure the game is always fair, there must be 7 officials with different functions present on the field. You can recognize them by their black and white striped shirts. The referee is the highest rank among them and has the most responsibilities. Then comes the umpire, the back judge, the head linesman, the side judge, the line judge, and the field judge. Miami has hosted the Super Bowl the most, with 11 games. The runner-up is New Orleans with 10. It normally takes place in a warmer climate or at an indoor stadium. The only exception was the game that took place at Tulane Stadium in New Orleans, when the temperature at game time was 39 degrees Fahrenheit. The Arizona Cardinals are older than the state they represent. The team was founded in 1898, and Arizona officially became a state only 14 years later. The team also had the longest period in NFL history when they didn't win a single game postseason. 51 years. NFL gives the winning team members the Super Bowl rings. Those never repeat each other, as the winners choose how to customize it to make it special. Designing them takes up to 4 months. The ring will normally have the team name and logo, the world champion's title, and the Super Bowl logo and number. The team can award the rings to whomever they decide, not just players, but coaches, trainers, executives, personnel, general staff, and also former players and coaches. That's why the total price of the set is around $5 million. The Green Bay Packers Super Bowl 45 ring had over 100 diamonds, 13 of them representing every title the team has won since 1929.
Now, I've tried this one myself, too. Pinch your elbow as hard as you can. You barely feel pain. How come? Well, different areas of your skin have different nerve endings. Our bodies are designed to be more sensitive to pain in places that are at higher risk of getting damaged. Those important parts have more nerve endings so that we're more alert and able to protect ourselves. And thick skin, like that on elbows, has fewer pain detectors. Now, I'm not talking about the tingling, jolting pain you can feel when you hit your elbow against something. Oh, that feels almost like your entire arm has been electrocuted. It's not a feeling I would consider funny, but it comes from the funny bone. Now, the funny bone isn't actually a bone. It's a nerve that starts in your spine, goes through your neck, through your elbow, and through your fingers. Its real name is the ulnar nerve. It's one of the 3 primary nerves in your arm, and it provides sensation to the fingertips. Your ulnar nerve is well protected by muscle, fat, and bone. But there's one spot at your elbow where this nerve is exposed, and that spot is, the funny bone. A different but real version of Achilles' story, huh? Okay, so now you know why it hits so different when you bump your funny bone and why you feel nothing when you pinch your elbow. Now, the next phenomenon is related to socially awkward moments. Okay, maybe not entirely. It might happen when your crush gives you a compliment. I'm talking about blushing. Now, I'm not sure those butterflies in your stomach exist when you're in love. But I'm sure of this, when you blush, your stomach lining also turns red. Yeah, I've looked. The stomach lining is the tissue that protects your stomach walls from the acid inside. When you blush, it also turns red because blushing happens when the blood rises to the surface of the skin. This affects the stomach too. Now, this is a natural process, a physiological response to the change in your emotions. Now, since we're talking about the stomach, it might be a good time to mention that the stomach fluid has the ability to melt a steel table. Yup. This means the acid would be able to digest your internal organs. Luckily, the stomach lining prevents this from happening. Number 3 is about letting you know that you can glow in the dark. Now, don't turn off the lights just yet. You can't see it with the unaided eye. These visuals of glittering human bodies come from ultra-sensitive cameras. Japanese scientists were the first to capture the images of human bioluminescence. Only ultra-sensitive cameras can reveal that our bodies emit tiny amounts of light, because this light is 1,000 times weaker than the human eye can detect. Apparently, all living creatures produce a small amount of light thanks to the chemical reactions in their cells. Humans are newly added to this list. The researchers had been photographing the upper bodies of the volunteers for several days. The results showed that the amount of emitted light followed a 24-hour cycle. The glow is at its highest in late afternoon and lowest late at night. Plus, the brightest light is emitted from the cheeks, forehead, and neck. Interestingly, this does not correspond with the brightest areas caught by thermal cameras. Did you know you're a little bit taller in the morning than you are later at night? Yes, I've been measuring you. Seriously, this height difference is related to gravity. Its force compresses the cartilage in your spine and knees when you stand up or sit down throughout the day. But when you're lying down, your spine decompresses and relaxes. That's why when you wake up in the morning after resting in bed all night, you're taller. The increase in height is not even above an inch, so don't bet on who is taller after hearing this information. Fun fact, astronauts returning from a mission are a few inches taller than they usually are on Earth. It's because of the lack of gravity on the International Space Station. They don't remain that tall forever, though. When they're on the Earth again, gravity gradually squeezes them back down to their usual height. Now, let's get back to the organ we've already spoken about, the skin. Yes, the skin is an organ. In fact, it's the largest organ in your body. It contributes to about 15% of your body weight. What else does this organ do, besides covering your body? It performs vital functions. For instance, it protects your body from external physical and biological harm. Plus, it prevents excessive water loss. Now, I can't help wondering what other surprises the human body has in store for us. But right now, let's move on to the animal planet. Owls don't have eyeballs. Instead, they have something called eye tubes. Their rod-shaped eyes do not move in their sockets as our eyeballs do. That's why owls would have to move their entire bodies to look around. But moving their torsos would make some noise, and other animals would hear it. So owls have evolved to have necks that can twist to around 270 degrees, and they move super silently. But why the concern? Well, night vision requires large corneas to get as much light as possible. This is the main reason why most nocturnal animals, such as the slow loris or tarsier, have big eyes. For owls, it works a little differently. Since they have small heads, such large eyes wouldn't be able to fit inside. Now, even though these creatures don't have eyeballs, they have 3 sets of eyelids. One set is for blinking, one is for sleeping, and the last one is for keeping their eye tubes clean. So, do the owls give a hoot about that? Yes, they do. Moving on from nocturnal animals to the ones you're more familiar with. Meow. Cats have an extra organ that allows them to taste scents in the air. This organ is called Jacobson's organ, or the vomeral nasal organ. Jacobson's organ is located inside the cat's nasal cavity and opens into the roof of the mouth. This organ can detect specific chemicals by using nerves that lead directly to the brain. That's not a regular sniffing, though. The odor receptors of Jacobson's organ aren't designed to catch ordinary smells. They detect chemicals that have no odor at all. In other words, cats can detect undetectable smells. It's not just this. Jacobson's organ increases the sense of smell. For instance, when kittens need to find their mother's milk, imagine there are 2 mother cats and 4 kittens. Kittens can distinguish their mother from the other grown-up cat with the help of their sense of smell. Now, when 2 people meet, they assess each other's body language. Cats can usually do this by sniffing each other's heads. This greeting releases pheromones that can tell a lot about one cat to the other, like what the other feline likes to eat or if they are healthy or not. They can even evaluate whether the other cat is happy or moody, all thanks to Jacobson's organ. Now, another fact about cats. Their nose has distinct ridges that look like a pattern. Similar to our fingerprints, every cat has a unique nose print. It can be used as a form of identification. Okay, cat, we can nail you for breaking the vase. We have your nose prints all over it. Now, do you want to cut a deal? Just tell us what you know about the dog and that chewed-up DVD. Dog lovers? No, I didn't forget about you. Here's a myth you've probably heard. Dogs are colorblind. But they aren't. However, it is true that the color range they can detect is limited compared to the spectrum humans can see. Their color palette consists mostly of yellows, blues, and violets. Our reds, greens, and oranges are not noticeable to them. Now this one is about turtles. These animals cannot leave their shells and get back whenever they want. In fact, they are completely attached to their shells. These shells grow with turtles, similar to the human skin. A turtle's shell consists of 50 bones. It also includes a skeleton with the spine and rib cage. So, they go on vacation with it. It's kind of like an RV that you can't get rid of.
The button on the top of your baseball cap is there purely for aesthetic purposes. By the way, this little thing has a name. Professionals call it a squacho. Its initial function was to hold the 4 panels of the cap together. As hat making improved, the panels stopped needing it to hold together, and squacho was removed. But hats didn't look the same without it. Soon after, the squacho returned due to popular demand. Originally, high-heeled shoes weren't intended for galas and proms. Back in the 10th century, horse riding was pretty tough with flat-soled shoes, and many riders' feet would constantly fall out of the stirrups. higher heels helped deal with that problem. The grip was much firmer with them, and they grew in popularity. It wasn't long before they became a fashion accessory to match stylish outfits. Notable people wouldn't want to be seen without them. Riding a horse with fancy heels was the equivalent of owning a luxurious sports car. Even though heels were worn mainly by men at the start, ladies picked up on the iconic trend in the 17th century. It's been one of the biggest ever since. In ancient Rome, salt was so precious that people even called it white gold. With scorching heat and no fridges, its purpose was to preserve food, mainly meat and fish. As a bonus, it made everything tastier. Sal, which is salt in Latin, was used instead of money to pay salaries. Here is where the word salary originated. Rice is the oldest cultivated food in human history. Its origins as wild grass started in a small valley around 15,000 years ago in Southeast Asia. Today, it's served globally as a staple diet and popular ingredient to 3.5 billion people. It would be difficult to imagine a world without video calls you use through your phone camera or laptop. The technology has helped game-changing innovations like working from home. Still, video calls' original purpose is far from how we use them today. The technology was introduced to confirm if the coffee was still in a pot. In 1993, researchers at the University of Cambridge found it frustrating when they took a break to get a cup of coffee, only to find that the pot was empty. So, they invented a device to monitor it and hooked up a camera that provided their computer with a live stream of the coffee pot. Thanks to these researchers, we can work in pajamas now. We know Albert Einstein for various achievements, but there's something he co-invented that goes overlooked. Together with his student, he invented a modified refrigerator. It's not like the ones we use today. In the 1920s, fridges weren't quite as safe as they produced poisonous gases. He wanted to create a safer version that didn't require electricity, without moving parts, and only needed a heat source to operate. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough funding, so the project dried up. Later, in the 1950s, electric fridges became popular. But in 2008, engineers from Oxford University revived this retro design. They're still working on it, but once they finish, the Einstein fridge will come in handy for rural areas without power and people who want to live off the grid. That random QWERTY design doesn't make things easier. In the 1870s, Christopher Sholes invented a layout that ensured typing was twice as fast. But with commonly used letters next to each other, it was a bit too fast, and the machines constantly jammed. So, he then developed the QWERTY design. It forced typists to adopt a pecking style. This way, they would search for a letter and slowly type with their index fingers. The keyboards remain unchanged even today, and people all over the world have somehow adapted to them. The plastic end of your shoelace is an aglet, and people have used it since ancient Rome. Sure thing, they had no plastic back then, so those aglets were made of stone, glass, or even metal. Extra wealthy people could accessorize their shoes with precious metals like brass or silver. What came first, the TV or the remote control? The technology that functions in the remote is older by several decades. In 1898, Nikola Tesla created a machine to control mechanical devices with radio waves. Initially, he tried selling the idea of a radio waves device operating I/O through remote-control boats, but the potential buyers were not interested. He was way ahead of his time, as remote controls were finally used with televisions in 1956. As engineer Percy Spencer initially invented something brilliant in 1945, he was working on a new vacuum tube, the magnetron, which was used with early radar systems. While working on the project, he found that the chocolate in his pocket had melted. Realizing the heating potential of the magnetron, he used it on corn kernels, which turned into popcorn. Then, he tried testing it with eggs, but things got a bit messy. So once the yolk was washed away, he built a metal box, keeping the energy within, and the first microwave oven was built. In 1733, a duke in England requested William Kent, an architect, to make a traveling device for his kids. William accepted and built the first ever stroller, but nobody had to push it. Instead of handles, it was built like a carriage and pulled by a goat or a small pony. Only a few were made as it was pricey. More than 100 years later, in 1848, the first stroller with push handles became available and more affordable. Police are often associated with donuts, and there is actually a reason why. During the 1950s in the USA, police officers that worked night shifts found it hard to locate anywhere open for a midnight snack. Donut shops at this time were family-owned. They were working hard throughout the night, providing fresh donuts for the coming day. The shops were vulnerable at night, becoming the perfect relationship: nourishment for the police and extra protection for the shops. Popping bubble wrap is an excellent source of relaxation, and it's also helpful with delicate packages. In 1957, two engineers glued together two shower curtains, trapping the air bubbles between. This is how the first bubble wrap was made. The result they were looking for was a sort of textured wallpaper. Still, it didn't go well on the market. Sometime later, they tried to sell it as insulation for greenhouses, and once again, they failed. Everything changed in 1960 when IBM needed to ship delicate computer parts. The bubble wrap was perfect, and they continued to collaborate. Using maps with your phone has become a far easier way to navigate, but the old-fashioned handheld maps were once the only option, creating a competitive industry. So much so that map makers would draw in phantom settlements to avoid rivals stealing from them. These fake towns were called a copyright trap. However, one of these fake settlements became real. Agloe in New York was drawn into a map by General Drafting Co. Another competing map maker had also included this town on their own, and the copyright trap was sprung. But in court, they found that in 1950, a general store had actually been built there. And the owner assumed that Agloe was a real area based on the map, so he named the shop after it. So there was no violation found, as technically Agloe was real, thanks to that general store. In 1943, Vesta Stout from Illinois was working with securing parcels. She was disappointed with the poor paper tape, as it would fall apart when wet. So she asked her boss to try to make waterproof tape. Her request was ignored, but she wrote a letter to President Roosevelt with an idea of how to make a better tape. Not only did she explain her concept, but she also provided it with detailed designs. He approved the idea and ordered the changes. The new tape was so helpful for freight transport that everyone wanted it, and they started selling it at hardware stores. In the 1950s, many people would wrap air ducts, and it was then deceptively named duct tape. Still, the adhesive on the sticky side wasn't suitable for cold and hot temperatures, which caused the tape to fall off. Despite this, people continued to use that tape for almost everything else. In the airport, they usually ask you to take your laptop out of your backpack and put it in a separate bin while going through the security check. Laptops are dense, and the X-rays can't see through them, so you could be hiding something dangerous there. If it's out and it's on its own in a separate bin, it's easier for the scanners to capture a prospective hazard. Normally, the messages you send using iMessage are blue, but look, this time it turned green. No need to panic. It's not like the user blocked you or anything. It's just that you sent a regular SMS and not an iMessage. iMessages can only be sent to people who own an Apple device. So, if the recipient doesn't have one, they're all gonna be green. Another reason your phone might opt for an SMS is that your iPhone isn't connected to the internet. iMessages go through the web, and SMS uses a cellular signal. The jacks you put in your devices have little plastic rings on them that separate different sections. These sections are called pins, and each of them serves a different purpose. Each plug will have at least one plastic ring because any plug must be separated into at least two pins. One of them is there to cancel out any interference, and the other to carry the signal. If, for example, your headphones have one ring and two sections, they have a mono playback. They deliver the same sound to both your right and your left ear. If there are two rings and three sections, then there is a basic one to cancel out interference and the other two for either ear. 3 rings and 4 sections mean that you have a set, one basic, one for either of the ears, and the last one is the microphone pin. I bet you've never even noticed, but all credit cards, no matter what bank or country they come from, are the exact same size. The first ever credit card was issued in 1958 by the Bank of America. And later, the international standard was established for every issuer around the world to follow. The standard dictates both the proportions and the thickness. Whistles can work perfectly fine even if they don't have that ball inside, yet they all have it. That's because even though there's a sound without the ball, the noise it creates is very flat and not distinguishable enough. When you blow, the ball starts moving around inside, creating different pitches and making the noise more noticeable. Jeans have had those metal rivets ever since they were invented. Jacob Davis, the man who made the first pair of jeans, added copper rivets to those spots where the pants were more likely to rip to make them stronger. Today, they have more of a decorative purpose because they're distinctive and traditional for jeans. A basketball has little dots all over its surface, and they serve as friction points. It's important for that ball not to slip out of the hands. There were times when they played basketball with a soccer ball. The floor was very slippery, and it was impossible to play because you'd have to be very careful just to keep the ball in place. So, they had to redesign it. The more points of contact any object has with some surface, the more friction there is, and the less likely it is to slip on the surface. So, that's how the ball got its dots. Those holes at the end of the handles aren't just there for you to hang your pans easily. You can also place your cooking spoon in there while making a meal. It'll hang right above the pan, and the sauce won't spill around. Make sure to tap off the sauce or food beforehand though, so that it doesn't go down the spoon's handle. You unload the dishwasher, and while everything is dry, your plastic containers get all wet once again. Seems like they never get dry, and that's actually true. The reason for it is the material. The dishes heat up and cool down slowly, so the remaining water evaporates and dries out easily. When you take out those plastic containers, they cool down way too fast, so the water doesn't dry out of the surface and just stays there. Another water source is those upside-down cups that collect water on top. But have you noticed that cups have chips on the bottom? They serve as a water drain in the dishwasher. So yeah, these cups don't accumulate water in the dishwasher. Take a look at aluminum foil. One side of it is always shiny, and the other one is dull. When producing the foil, they flatten it with rollers. It's so thin that the rollers tear it. So they take 2 layers at a time. So the sides facing the roller remain shiny, and those in the middle stay dull. We say it all the time, 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. without thinking. Why such a choice of letters? It's just Latin, which is still used for many other abbreviations. AM stands for ante meridiem, which means before noon. PM stands for post meridiem, meaning afternoon. Same with pounds, which are noted as LB from the Latin phrase libra pondo. Most movie theater seats are red, and the reason isn't better visibility, but quite the opposite. In low light conditions, red is the first color that fades away in our eyes. And that's what we want in a movie theater, to see nothing but the screen. Also, movie theaters were inspired by fancy Italian opera houses, so that's another reason too. Have you ever wondered why so many Disney characters wear white gloves? Well, back when animated movies were black and white, putting white gloves on characters was a way to make the hands stand out from the rest of the body. Then animation evolved, but the gloves stayed as a Disney tradition. But there are other reasons too. Human hands make animal characters more humanized and relatable. Also, those gloves are way easier to animate, which speeds up the process. Cats often rub their bodies against your legs, but do you know why they do it? This way, they transfer their scent to you, marking you as their territory and as their human. It's also a sign of affection. By doing this, they show that you're part of their inner circle. Wonder why it's so hard to swat a fly? Well, to a fly, we're sloths. That's because they see things in slow motion compared to us. Species have a different perception of speed. The speed we see will be twice as fast for a turtle, and it will be 4 times slower for a fly. Turn a video to 0.25 speed and imagine someone approaching you at this pace. Well, that's how a fly sees you. So yeah, it has enough time to escape. Road signs have different shapes and colors to send different signals to your brain. Oval shapes are more friendly, and squared ones are very familiar and secure, so they're usually regulatory. Triangles reflect instability, so they're usually warning signs. And finally, the stop sign has a special octagon shape, the most unusual and unsettling. It's supposed to draw your attention to it. Together with the red color, this sign stands out the most, just like it's supposed to. Some sidewalks have little plates with bumps on them. We don't pay much attention to them, but they're very important for visually impaired people. They signal a slope that then leads to a crosswalk. Also, there are several patterns that signal different things. Name the school grades: A, B, C, D, and F. No E, but why? The modern grading system dates back to 1897. In the beginning, it was all the letters from A to E. A meant excellent. B was good. C was fair. And D was passed. Below that was an E, or fail, which was often confused with the opposite, excellent. So soon enough, it was changed. F for fail is way more intuitive. You find yourself at a food fair in Iceland when you see it for the first time. Volcano bread. You eat a slice and oddly enough, it actually tastes good. Unsure of how this works, you check out the baking process. Is this kitchen really strange looking, or is it just me? The baking spot is in nature, specifically in a hot springs field. You better watch your steps so you don't get burned by the hot vapor jolting from the ground. Now, a local baker shares their traditional rye bread recipe with you. Rye flour, check. Yeast, check. You mix it all together and pour it into a metal pot. Next on the list is digging the hole where you'll place the pot to bake. You dig for about 16 inches until you can see the water bubbling from the ground. If you want to do it like a local, you'll use your finger to check the water temperature. Yikes, that's hot. Actually, the ground is heated by lava. Iceland is one of the most volcanic regions in the world, with over 30 active volcanoes at any one time. After you bury the bread in volcanic soil, you leave it there and wait 24 hours until it's ready. The next day, the bread is fully baked and super tasty. And the best part is, you just participated in an ancient Icelandic tradition. People have been doing this since at least the 1800s. Imagine it's your first day of work in a museum, and your assigned task is to clean the mask of Tutankhamun. You grab your cleaning utensils and then, oh no, this can't be happening. You just broke Tutankhamun's beard. I never wish this to happen to anyone, but this is actually a true story. Back in 2014, an employee at the Egyptian Museum knocked off the beard of Tutankhamun's mask and glued it back on, hoping no one would notice. This mask was discovered in 1922 and is considered one of the 10 symbols of our human civilization. Oh, and the best part of this story? It took historians until 2016 to discover the poor glue job. So, if you visited the museum between 2004 and 2016, maybe you saw the glued beard. If I say Sahara, what comes to mind? An infinite desert landscape, right? Well, according to scientists, the Sahara isn't always a desert. From time to time, it becomes green. But you probably won't be seeing this in your lifetime. Every 10,000 years, the Sahara lives through a humid period, where the sand gives way to lush green vegetation and sparkling lakes. This happens due to a tilt in the Earth's axis, which affects different weather patterns around the globe. Can you imagine the Sphinx surrounded by rainforest? It's mind-blowing. And speaking of the Sahara, say you traveled back to 1800 BCE. If you timed it right, you might get to see the construction of the so-called Black Pyramid in the city of Dashur. These are not the famous Giza pyramids, but they serve the similar purpose of being a final resting place. In 1892, archaeologists excavating the area found an important part of the Black Pyramid that was lost for centuries. The benben, also called a pyramidion, was the tip of ancient Egyptian pyramids. A benben consists of a solid block usually made of limestone. Most of them were covered with gold and reflected the first rays of light from the sun every day. Can anyone get me a time machine, please? Remember when you ate something really spicy, your cheeks turned red? Apparently, that can happen to birds too. For example, canaries can change colors after eating peppers. These birds have a special pigment that allows them to switch shades depending on their diet. So, if a yellow canary eats red peppers, it can turn orange or red. Can rocks move on the ground on their own? Well, you might be under that impression if you visit Racetrack Playa in California. The site is a dry lake bed and home to one of the world's strangest phenomena, the so-called sailing stones. Think 100-pound rocks moving around alone, leaving behind trails as long as 1,500 feet. They were discovered in the 1900s, and until recently, no one was lucky enough to be on the site while they were moving. It was only in 2014, after much observation and research, that scientists solved this mystery. The sailing stones appeared because of the perfect balance between wind, ice, and water. When it rains, the water that falls on the ground freezes and forms a coat of ice above the ground. If it's windy, the rocks are easily pushed around, sailing along the lake bed. But hey, if you ever visit Racetrack Playa, don't disturb the rocks. On the western coast of France, you'll find the vacation hotspot known as the island of Ré. It attracts tourists looking for scenic landscapes and beautiful beaches, but that's not all it's famous for. There, an extraordinary phenomenon occurs when two different wave patterns collide with each other, something called a cross sea. It's almost as if the sea were a checkerboard divided into hundreds of squares. And no, it's not an optical illusion. A cross sea only happens in places where different quality waters meet. For a tourist to see the cross sea in Ré, this probably means that there was a storm in a different sea nearby. This stormy water travels with the help of currents and meets the water of Ré, creating these oddly shaped riptides. Oh, and apart from this island and Israel, there's nowhere else in the world where you could see such a thing. The following sight will either give you goosebumps or make you marvel at its weirdness. I'd say it depends on the time of day you visit. Next to the small town of Gryfina in Poland, you'll find a very unusual sight, a pine tree forest where each tree is bent at its base. If you visit during the daytime, I guess you'll be fascinated by these trees' sharp 90-degree curves. You can even use their trunks as a stool if you decide to have a picnic, for example. But visiting the site at night will most likely give you chills. A thin layer of fog hovers around, making the forest seem quite unwelcoming. Scientists still can't explain why the trees are the way they are. So, are you a daytime or nighttime visitor? You went for a hike and suddenly encountered a big cloud of fog. This may ruin your photo ops, but there's one thing you can hope for. Foggy days are the perfect conditions for a phenomenon called fog bow, otherwise known as a white rainbow. This happens because of numerous tiny water droplets that cause fog, smaller than 0.002 inches. So, instead of the multicolored bow, you get a transparent one, with red outer edges and a bluish inner edge. Now, say you're roaming in a little town in Europe, appreciating the century-old buildings and good summer weather. You feel hungry and decide to type into your Google Maps the name of that restaurant your friend recommended. It's only 10 minutes away by foot. You follow the blue dot on your GPS and arrive at your destination, quick and easy. We all love this free piece of technology, don't we? But what if I told you that the US spends over $2 million daily to maintain the satellites to make it work? Yep, that's the price. And to implement it, they spent over $12 billion US dollars. Have you ever heard of something called a natural snowball? This could be proof that nature is really perfect. In 2016, the beaches of the Gulf of Ob in northwest Siberia were filled with rows of giant snowballs. Think balls measuring up to 3 feet across. This rare yet beautiful natural phenomenon happens when small pieces of ice are rolled by strong winds and water. The further they roll, the more ice they gather, and the more that ice is polished. They end up as giant, perfectly shaped snowballs. They look pretty amazing on their own, but it's quite a sight when hundreds of them are together. There are sharks that glow in the dark. For example, swell sharks. They live in the dark ocean depths, almost 1,700 feet under the surface. No one knows why exactly, but they emit a fluorescent glow only other swell sharks can see. Scientists detected the glow because they used filters that blocked out yellow light. They think that could be the way for these big fish to communicate with their buddies. This glow helps sharks fight infections on a microbial level. Cowbirds have secret passwords they use to recognize each other. They're a specific type of parasite bird since they lay their eggs in other bird species' nests. The young cowbirds have an inner mechanism where they recognize their species singing, like some sort of secret password only they know. That's how they manage to find others of their kind. A grizzly bear has an incredibly strong bite. It may look cute, but if you're close to this big guy, you better stay out of reach of its sharp claws and especially its mouth. Its bite force is more than 8 million pascals, which means it can crush a bowling ball. Some animals have skin-deep stripes, and others have more superficial ones. Tigers are in the first group. Not only is their fur striped, but their skin is as well. It's the same with some other furry big cats, like snow leopards. Giraffes and zebras are in the second group, since they have patterns only on their coats. Speaking of zebras, do you think they're black with white stripes or white with black stripes? At first, it really looks like the second option is correct. Their black stripes mostly end towards the inside of their legs and on their bellies, and the rest of it is white. But that's not true. Surprisingly, they're black with white stripes. All of their fur, both white and black, grows from follicles that have something called melanocyte cells. All animals have these cells. They produce a pigment called melanin, and it gives color to their hair and skin. When it comes to zebras, chemical messengers tell which melanocytes send pigment to which area of fur. That's why zebras have a black and white pattern. But white is not actually its own pigment. It's an absence of melanin. So, black is their default color. Koalas have fingerprints that are so close to ours that they could even taint crime scenes. It doesn't seem like they have a lot in common with humans, but take a closer look at their hands. They have distinctive loops and arches. So if any koalas want to do something illegal, it would be a good idea for them to wear gloves. Ghost crabs growl when they're around creatures they don't like or find threatening. They do it using teeth in their stomachs. First, they'll let you know they'll defend themselves if you try anything by showing you their claws. If that doesn't work, they'll go for fearsome growling noises like dogs. But the noise is coming from rubbing their 3 elongated hard teeth inside their stomach. Ghost crabs produce the same noise when they're grinding up food. Speaking of teeth, did you know narwhal tusks are actually some sort of an inside-out tooth? Unlike the majority of other whales, narwhals are the ones that come with a large tusk, or tooth that grows from the inside of their jaw. It has up to 10 million nerve endings, and they're unprotected, which means its tusk is very sensitive to any type of contact. It's almost like a piece of skin, because tusks usually don't have many nerve endings. Up to 95% of humans are right-handed, and it's the same with bottlenose dolphins. There are even more right-handed ones among them than among humans. During one study, scientists found that bottlenose dolphins turn to their left side over 99% of the time, which means they're right-handed. They place their right side and right eye closer to the ocean floor as they go for prey, such as squids, shrimps, or smaller fish. More cool facts from the ocean. Did you know humpback whales use bubbles when they go after their prey? You might think they don't need any special method considering how large they are. But when they're lurking for prey in the open waters, these whales team up and use something called a bubble net technique. While swimming in an upward spiral, they blow bubbles underwater. These bubbles make it difficult for fish to escape. The oldest evidence we have of domesticated cats dates up to 12,000 years ago. Researchers discovered this almost 20 years ago when they were digging through an ancient village in Cyprus. They found cat bones right next to human ones. which suggested they were close even when their lives came to an end. Humans were hunters, so they domesticated dogs first, somewhere up to 29,000 years ago. Dogs helped them catch other animals, but they didn't think they needed cats until they started to settle down and store surplus crops. Mice became frequent guests in grain stores, so cats came in handy in those times. Puffins are quite innovative when they want to scratch their bodies. They can surely be proud of their stunning beaks, but they obviously think it's not enough for scratching. Researchers noticed they tend to spontaneously take a small wooden stick to scratch an itchy spot. There's a special type of ant that only lives in a small part of Manhattan. The Broadway medians at the 63rd and 76th Street is the area these crawling critters decided was the best spot for them. The Manhattan ant looks like it's from Europe, but no European species can actually match it. Hey Potterheads, can you believe there's a thing like chocolate frog? Well, not quite, but it looks like it. New Guinea and Australia weren't always separated. They spent millions of years together until about 12,000 years ago, rising sea levels divided them. Since they were together for so long, some animals and plants still inhabit both areas, including green tree frogs. These frogs have spread really far and wide, and some of them, who live in hot, swampy regions surrounded by plenty of crocodiles, actually look like they're made of chocolate. We all know flamingos for their specific color, but they're not actually pink. They're born gray, and that's how they would stay if it weren't for their diet of blue-green algae and shrimp. These foods have a specific natural dye, which is why flamingo feathers turn pink over time. These little Tasmanian devils grow up and leave their moms. They socialize together, forming bonds that last for the rest of their lives. Not only them, cows also have stronger social ties than we think. They like to socialize, and they make long-lasting friendships. One research even discovered their heart rates significantly increase as a sign of stress when they're separated from their BFFs. Imagine you could simply freeze yourself solid during the cold winter days instead of listening to your teeth chatter and trying to tighten your jacket. That's what frogs can do. Aquatic frogs mostly hibernate underwater and spend most of the winter at the bottom of a pond, lake, or some other body of water. Toads and frogs are generally cold-blooded, which means the temperature of their body takes on the temperature of their surroundings. So, frogs can freeze during the winter because of a high concentration of sugar or glucose in their vital organs. Once they unfreeze, they continue as if nothing happened. Octopuses have 3 hearts and blue blood. They can move at speeds of 25 miles per hour, and they spray ink that not only blurs the predator's visual field, but actually harms them. Also, they have 9 brains, the central one and 8 smaller brains located in their arms. That's why their arms can open a shellfish while the central brain is busy doing something else. An octopus even tastes with its arms. They have cells in their suckers that enable the arms to touch and taste in a way that they detect chemicals marine creatures produce. That way, an octopus can distinguish prey from rocks. Braces for dogs, unimaginably colorful shrimps, firework-spitting fish. The animal kingdom is full of surprises that prove that nature has the most inventive mind. A single strand of hair can hold up to 3 ounces, meaning, theoretically, all the hair on your head could hold the weight of 2 full-grown elephants. Some snails can sleep for up to 3 years, but they usually get in 13 to 15-hour snoozes and wake up with a 30-hour boost of energy. Periodical cicadas come out of their underground shelters every 13 or 17 years. This is a biological adaptation so that no other animal can depend on them as a food source. Most animals' lifespans are shorter. Scientists theorize that early humans lost their fur so they wouldn't overheat while hunting. We instead evolved to store fat to keep warm, which is why your head is covered in long, thick hair. There's no fat on your scalp. Dogs can wear braces to fix their teeth, just like humans. And you might not believe it, but this invention has existed for over 30 years now. Dogs can also have dental fillings if they chipped one of their teeth in case of cavities and crowns. The smallest monkey in the world, the pygmy marmoset, could hug your thumb like a tree trunk. Owls are the birds able to see the color blue, and they don't exactly have eyeballs like humans. Theirs are more like eye tubes, since they can't move inside the eye socket like your eyes. An owl must rotate its whole head. Butterflies feel smells with their feet, snakes with their tongues, and octopuses with their arms. Blind mole rats live underground and send each other information by banging their heads on the tunnel walls. Reindeers change their eye color depending on the season. Their eyes are gold in the summer and blue in the winter. Bees show the location of pollen source to other bees with a waggle dance. The fastest registered human punch is 45 miles per hour. A mantis shrimp strikes at 50 miles per hour. These creatures also have 16 light-sensitive cones in their eyes against our 3, and thanks to that, they can see colors unimaginable for us humans. They're very colorful too, even to our eyes, and how they see each other is beyond our wildest fantasies. Pistol shrimps, however, beat their relatives in power because they close their big right claw with such speed that it creates a white-hot air bubble underwater, and it's literally hot. The temperature of this tiny bubble momentarily reaches almost that of the surface of the sun. The oldest tree we know is called Methuselah. It's 4,700 years old. This thing was a sapling in the 27th century BCE. Dolphins sleep with one half of their brain resting while the other remains alert. Horses have one heart like you and me, but they have a heart-like organ at the bottom of each foot called a frog. It pumps blood up the leg every time the horse stands on it. Many types of seahorses are similar to chameleons, not only because of their ability to change color, but also in that their two eyes move independently from each other. Some seahorses can't change color at will, but they're born with color to blend with their habitat. For example, red for coral or green for algae. Baby flamingos are grayish-white. Algae and seafood they feed on contains a substance called carotenoids, and thanks to it, over time, flamingos acquire pink plumage. It's the same substance that's present in carrots, and your skin can turn orange too if you eat too much of it. The black and white color of a zebra doesn't help it hide from predators. What it does is help avoid bites from dangerous insects, such as tsetse fly. A fly sees a zebra, but when approaching, it flies by or crashes into the animal and bounces off. Nobody knows exactly why this happens. One theory says that the black and white coat of a zebra creates an optical illusion that confuses insects. Thanks to their tallness and good eyesight, giraffes can see danger approaching from afar. Their head is like a watchtower, and they warn each other of the threat in a very unusual way, with the help of their low humming sound. Seagulls can drink salt water. There are salt-secreting glands near their eyes. These glands purify seawater very quickly, and the salty residue that comes out through the nostrils. Perhaps the most impossible creature in the world is a jellyfish. It doesn't have any sensory organs we're used to, like eyes, ears, and nose. It has no skeleton, but most importantly, it hasn't got a brain or heart. Its body is almost entirely made of water. That's why if you take a jellyfish out of the sea and put it on the shore, it will soon melt. At the same time, there's a species of jellyfish that can live forever in a safe environment. Horseshoe crabs have 2 eyes on the sides of their head, 5 more on top of their shell, 2 near their mouth, and 1 on the tail. The latter is used as a photoreceptor. It catches the sunlight and tells the crab if it's day or night outside. Hippos don't get their skin burned in the blazing sun because they produce their own sunscreen. It's kind of pink sweat that covers their whole body. Kangaroo rats can go without water for years and sometimes even throughout their entire lives. They live in extremely arid deserts and get all the water they need from the seeds and plants they feed on. Plumed basilisk lizards have an uncanny ability to run on water. First, their hind feet are equipped with long toes with fringes of skin that can spread out in the water. As a result, a bigger surface of the lizard's foot comes into contact with the water. Then it pumps its legs incredibly fast when it runs on water. This creates little pockets of air that prevent the animal from drowning by keeping it on the surface. The cardinal fish has been called firework spitting for a reason. When this little critter guzzles too many ostracods, a type of zooplankton, the tiny creatures start to glow inside the fish's body due to their bioluminescence. As a result, the cardinal fish becomes more visible, exposing it to predators. That's why the fish spits the ostracods out, which looks like it breathes outbursts of bluish fire. Opossums are immune to snake venom. The secret is a peptide that helps these critters neutralize dangerous chemicals. This is why snakes are a favorite treat on opossums' diet. Meerkats have dark patches around their eyes, but these black circles aren't just there to make the critters more adorable. They also function as built-in sunglasses. The dark fur on the patches blocks the blazing sun, so meerkats can gaze directly at the sky. On top of that, the sentry, a meerkat that watches out for birds and other predators, can easily see danger and alert its mates. Salmon are skilled navigators who could put most drivers to shame. However, this competition wouldn't be fair. After all, salmon can sense the planet's magnetic field and use this knowledge if they get lost. Dingoes have rotating wrists, just like humans. This helps them climb trees, use their paws like hands to catch food, and even open doors. Sponge crabs are the icons of style in the animal kingdom. They dig and cut into sea sponges to make their very own hats. The purpose of this hat is protective, though. Sponge crabs use them to hide from predators and protect themselves against bites. Flying squirrels glow under UV light, emitting pink light. It happens because they can absorb light and emit it back in another wavelength. Pockets are usually on the left side of shirts because most people are right-handed. Is this a myth or a fact? This is actually true. Many products favor the righties. Left-handed people will relate to this on so many levels. Let's say public transport. Have you ever noticed that the scanner at stations is typically on the right side? Household equipment and devices are one more example. Scissors, tweezers, bottle openers, and many other kitchen and household appliances are designed with right-handed people in mind. The same goes for shirt pockets. While some people use both hands equally and others change their hand preference between tasks, overall, most people are right-handed. A study has revealed that 75% to 90% of the world's population are right-handed and 10% are left-handed. This means it's more convenient for most people to have pockets on the left side than on the right side of their garments. Try it out for yourself. Your elbow kind of folds when you try to reach into the pocket on the right side. Whereas on the left side, your elbow makes an arc shape, which makes it easier to put things inside the pocket and take them out. Eating more protein leads to having bigger muscles. What do you think about this, bodybuilders? Myth or fact? This is a myth. It's true that eating protein is essential for building bigger muscles. I mean, proteins are building blocks of your body, and yet, eating more than you need is unnecessary. Everyone should drink 8 glasses of water a day. Do you think this is a myth or a fact? This is a myth, so don't blame yourself for drinking less water than recommended. 8 glasses are not a magic number. Hydration needs differ from one person to another. How much water you should drink every day depends on your activity and exercise level. The temperature of the place where you live affects this number too. If you live in a hot area, you sweat more and need to drink more water. Soup, coffee, tea, fruits, and other things you eat daily also contain water. Carrots are high in sugar, so you should avoid eating them. If this is true, we should warn bunnies. Any guesses? Fact or myth? It's a myth. Carrots are about 85% water. 1 pound of cooked carrots only contains 3 teaspoons of sugar. Compared to the amount of sugar in desserts, this is nothing. Plus, carrots are high in phytochemicals, and eating them can help lower blood sugar. Medieval people believed in flat Earth. Is this a myth or a fact? Obviously, flat Earth is a myth. But so is the history built around this myth. You can't say that at those times. The whole world was skeptical about Earth's spherical shape. Even everyday visible things proved that. For example, medieval people could see that the twilight glow during sunrise and sunset formed an arc over the horizon. Vikings wore horned helmets. Is this a myth or fact? The well-known image of a Viking warrior is almost always completed with a horned helmet, but in reality, there were no horns. There's no evidence that Viking helmets were horned. Detox juices cleanse your body. Is this a fact or myth? It's a myth. Detoxification doesn't work that way. Your internal organs are responsible for the process of cleansing: the spleen, liver, kidneys, especially the liver. Your body is always in a natural state of cleansing itself. A person doesn't need to drink juices for detoxification. Nuts are junk food. Any thoughts? Myth or fact? You're right, this is a myth. Nuts are full of healthy fats. They're good for your heart and other organs. The average American throws away about 82 pounds of textile waste per year. Is this a fact or myth? Fact! Imagine all that waste. When someone throws their clothes away, they don't disappear into thin air. These items most likely reach landfills as their final destination. Donating clothes and selling them in second-hand stores are a much better option. Now, you've probably heard about life-saving laundry tricks that are said to make your clothes super clean and as good as they were on day one. What if those laundry tips are actually myths? I got 3 of them lined up for you. Shirts should be buttoned when you put them in the laundry. Is it true or not? This is a myth. You'd better keep zippers closed to keep their teeth from catching the fabric of other clothes. But fastening the buttons of a shirt can expand the button net and the buttonhole. In the long term, buttons will start slipping out of place. Washing clothes in hot water is the most effective way to clean them. Is this a myth or fact? That's another laundry myth. You want to rid your clothes of germs, yet hot water alone won't be enough for this. Nowadays, many detergents can clean clothes in cold or warm water. You should remove stains from the face of the fabric. Is it true? Most people apply water and soap to the stain, starting from the front side of the fabric, but that's not the best option. A much better way is to start from the back. The stain can go deeper if you treat it from the front. Try to make the stain move up to the surface rather than push it inside. Listening to music is an effective tool for learning languages. Is it a myth or fact? It's a fact. Scientists say listening to a song and humming along can help you learn a language. Most people struggle to learn grammar, yet in our daily lives, we don't always follow grammar rules. Songs can help you pick up informal expressions. Scientists have also concluded that music can help you remember new words and add them to your vocabulary. Let me give you an example. It's from your first year at school. Yep, the alphabet song. Are you a morning person or a night owl? Either way, you might want to know these facts and myths about sleep. The longest someone went without sleep was 11 days. Do you think this is possible, or is it an urban legend? This is a fact. Randy Gardner set the record for the longest amount of time a person went without sleep. It was an experiment carried out by Stanford sleep researcher Dr. William C. Dement. The doctor recorded and monitored Randy Gardner's sleep activity. Gardner managed to stay awake for 11 days and 25 minutes. Your body eventually gets used to getting less sleep. Myth or fact? It's a myth. There are many studies proving that your body and especially your brain can't get used to sleeping less. Have you noticed that after a few nights of insufficient sleep, you begin to feel groggier during the day? That's your body trying to adjust to not getting enough rest. Long-term sleep deprivation affects your daytime performance, focus, and decision-making. Many grown-ups need 5 or fewer hours of sleep. Can it be true? Well, this one's easy. It's a myth. Experts from the National Sleep Foundation recommend that the average adult sleeps 7 to 9 hours per night. Some people have a genetic mutation thanks to which they wake up refreshed after a short night's sleep, but such people are an exception. 1 in 4 million. The ability to fall asleep in any place and at any time means you're a good sleeper. What do you think? Myth or fact? It's a myth. A good sleeper gets a proper amount of sleep and has a regular sleep schedule. Cats spend 2/3 of their life asleep. Do you believe that? This will probably come as no surprise. It's a fact. How many of the facts and myths did you guess correctly?
You know, people come up with the craziest ideas, don't they? I mean, candies on a stick? How did we even get there, and why? And how about the name lollipop? Well, let's look at some of the history and facts of the popular treat. Okay, it wasn't called a lollipop to begin with. We'll get to that name a bit later. But the initial lollipop-like sweet treat was most likely invented by people that roamed the earth thousands of years ago while still living in caves, no less. We know that they enjoyed honey and used a stick to collect it from beehives. Remember, this was way back when people had very few resources when it came to food or anything else for that matter. So, since they did not want anything to go to waste, they probably ended up licking the stick to make sure they ate every single drop of the nectar. Ancient Egyptians also had a lollipop of their own. They took various fruits and nuts and glazed them in honey. Sure, it made the food taste better, but it also helped with preserving it for longer. Since it has such a high concentration of sugar, honey pushes the water out of any harmful cells that could damage the food and make it go bad faster. To avoid those sticky honey fingers, they used a stick for eating these treats too. Let's fast forward to the 1600s when sugar became far more available to the general public. We now know that the English loved boiled sugar candy treats, and they popped those in the sticks, making them easier to enjoy. It's probably during this time when we came up with the term lollipop. As linguists believe, it basically translates to tongue slap. How come? Well, for the word tongue, they often use the word lolly in Northern England, and pop means slap. The lollipop timeline now takes us to 1912, when a man named Samuel Bourne actually invented a device that inserted sticks into candy. It became so popular that Samuel was awarded the keys to the city of San Francisco in 1916. However, it was a man named George Smith who owned a confectionery company that took credit for inventing the version of the lollipop which we've come to know and love to this day, back in 1908. He even trademarked the name in 1931. He claimed the name for the treat came from a famous racehorse named Lollipop. As you can probably tell by now, there is still some competition regarding this name, but what we do know for sure is that the lollipop became more and more popular and has remained such ever since. I mean, some modern companies are capable of producing up to 3 million of these candies every day, and the numbers are continuously growing. The largest lollipop ever created goes back to 2012. When a Californian candy manufacturer made a staggering chocolate-flavored one. It weighed more than 7,000 pounds and stood proud at nearly 5 feet tall. And if we take the stick into consideration too, this huge lollipop was over 11 feet tall. One of the most famous lollipop brands in the world is Chupa Chups. Did you know this brand's logo has a very famous name behind it? It was that of none other than Salvador Dali himself, the famous surrealist artist. The company approached him in 1969 to design the logo, and he came up with a distinguishing design that we know and love, which has the Chupa Chups name incorporated into a brightly colored daisy shape. The famous painter also came up with the idea that the logo should be placed on top of the candy instead of on the side. Why? So that you can always see it perfectly without any of the wrinkles that are often associated with candy packaging. Smart, right? More so, this brand is also associated with candies we enjoy in the most uncommon places. A story goes that a Chupa Chups was the first lollipop to be eaten in space. That was back in 1995, when an astronaut brought a Chupa Chups to the space station, officially making it the first lollipop to be consumed in a zero-gravity environment. I wonder if it tasted any different. There's a Chupa Chups under the sea, too, but it's not actually what you think. It's not the easiest thing in the world to enjoy a lolly underwater, right? But as they were advancing into an expedition to the Weddell Sea in the Antarctic Ocean back in 2000, a group of scientists stumbled upon a weird-looking sea sponge. It had a round-shaped head and was surprisingly similar to a lollipop. Obviously, it was given an appropriate name. The short version was S. Chupa Chups. If you ever search for pictures of these creatures, they look like underwater lollipops scattered on the bottom of the seabed. Now, while we're on the subject of shape, ever wondered why lollipop sticks have that square hole featured in the plastic design? It actually has to do with the manufacturing process. When produced, the candy is melted into the stick. This ensures that the head of the lollipop stays firmly attached to its corresponding stick so that it doesn't come loose and end up falling off. Ooh, what a pity! Another reason is more of a safety feature, so the lollipop stick doesn't become a choking hazard if swallowed by accident. Since it does allow air to go through, there's still some breathing room should it ever get stuck somewhere unfortunate. These days, the company Tootsie Roll has become the largest manufacturer of lollipops. They make over 16 million candies each and every day. As for the Dum Dum lollipops, they got their name from their inventor. He wanted a name that was easy to pronounce and remember by the younger generation, the main demographic for the product. How about the Dum Dum mystery flavor? Is it actually that mysterious? Nah, it's actually a pretty straightforward recipe. They make it when one batch of flavor is running out and the next one is beginning. So the flavor comes out of random combinations of two different tastes, whatever they may be. But what does the famous writer Charles Dickens have to do with the lollipop? Well, it turns out that in the modern world, this name first appeared in one of his novels. That was back in the 1800s. Lollipops aren't all fun and games. Some of them are even used to cure people. They are especially handy for young ones who find it difficult to deal with traditional versions. But some of those lollipops are strictly for adults. If you're a big fan of this sweet treat, you might want to prepare for a nice celebration on the 20th of July each year. That's when people in America celebrate National Lollipop Day. It's common for people to give each other lollies during this day. Some stores even launch unique lines for this occasion and also put their best products on display. The lollipop has some neat world records attached to it too, like the longest chain of people licking lollipops, which featured a mind-boggling 12,831 individuals. They put the event together in Valladolid, Spain back in September of 2008. And for people looking for something fancier, you should know that the world's most expensive lollipop comes with a hefty price of over $10,000. It's not one single lollipop per se, but a chair made with 60 pounds worth of confectioner's sugar. We literally have no idea how many lollipops the world consumes each day in total. We do know what countries include the biggest fans, though, and they are Germany, Ireland, Switzerland, Australia, and the UK. And we don't just call it a lollipop. There are different names for it, depending on where you are in the world, such as a lolly, sucker, or sticky pop, for example. Hey, I grew up with suckers. The most common flavor, often associated with this sweet treat, is cotton candy. It's probably because it's way easier to enjoy than the actual cotton candy, but you can still appreciate the flavor. For me, though, nothing beats a cherry sucker. How about you? Tell me about your favorite flavor in the comments. Apples you usually grab in the supermarket seem super fresh, but they can be up to a year old. It's all about how they're stored. First, they're covered with wax. Next, the wax is dried with hot air. And finally, the apples go into cold storage. Sloths are better at breath holding than dolphins. Those lazy buddies can slow their heart rate and hold their breath this way for up to 40 minutes. If they watched any breathtaking series, they'd literally breathe once per episode. If you look at any old photograph, you'll see that people didn't have those big smiles we love to have in the photos today. First, photographers preferred to keep things serious. So, instead of cheese, people would say prunes to keep their lips tight, and other things. Earth is not the only planet with water. Scientists from NASA strongly believe one of Jupiter's moons, Europa, has an ocean with twice as much water as we have on our planet. It's hidden under a thick layer of ice. Even Mars has some liquid water flowing. Cicadas are some of the biggest flying insects you can find out there. Most species are not that impressive, only about 1 to 2 inches long. Only. But the largest one, known as the empress cicada, has a body length of about 3 inches. In comparison, its wingspan reaches a whopping 8 inches. That's a really big bug. Not all goats peacefully munch on meadow grass. Some of them prefer climbing trees for food. Meet Moroccan goats, a natural phenomenon unique to North Africa. The thing is, they're way more attracted to argan tree fruits than to regular grass. That's quite understandable. Those fruits look just like golden apples. These goats are quite agile, so they easily climb up the trees to get the juicy treats. And they rarely need help from their nanny. There's a creature that can technically live forever. You see, there's a species of jellyfish known as Turcephora dorluda, or however you pronounce their name on the screen. Well, those guys have a superpower of respawning. So whenever they get any sort of physical damage or something, those jellyfish reset themselves back to the polyp stage and start all over again. Now, let's test you. Are there more trees on Earth or stars in the Milky Way? If your answer is stars, sorry, you're wrong. According to scientists' estimations, there are up to 100 billion stars in our galaxy and about 3 trillion trees on Earth. Now, that's impressive. Pluto still hasn't made a complete orbit since it was discovered. And now imagine that it was found back in 1930. It takes about 248 years for Pluto to make a full orbit around the Sun. By the way, Mercury is the fastest. It takes only about 88 days for this planet to make a full trip. However, Pluto will complete its first full orbit since its discovery in 2178. I can't wait. One more fun fact about planets. The dwarf planet Haumea has a very peculiar shape. It looks exactly like a potato. It's about the same size as Pluto and has rings similar to those Saturn has. If you ever want to find it, it's located beyond the orbit of Neptune. Nachos aren't some ancient Mexican food. They were invented less than 100 years ago. Ignacio Aña, nicknamed Nacho, is said to have created this dish in the 1940s. There's a nice story behind nachos. A regular customer got really hungry and asked if Ignacio could bring her and her 3 friends something different that day. He saw how hungry the ladies were and decided to cook something quick for them. He had to improvise using available ingredients, so he put some tortillas, grated loads of cheese on top of them, and heated the dish from above. To make the dish more savory, he added some jalapeno peppers on top. Mamie Finan, that very regular customer, asked what the name of the unusual snack was. Ignacio didn't think long and said the name was Nacho Special. Oranges aren't necessarily orange. If grown in subtropical regions, the climate isn't cold enough to break down the chlorophyll, so the fruit peel stays yellow or greenish. Such oranges usually get treated with ethylene gas that can help turn the oranges orange. Aren't you impressed with that? Okay, it's time for a little riddle for you. What's common between peanut butter and an engagement ring? Both of them contain diamonds. Scientists have learned how to turn peanut butter into diamonds. They extracted the oxygen from CO2. They got the carbon and then put it under intense pressure, and in the end, they got diamonds. In a jiff, I suppose. Pufferfish, also known as blowfish, are famous for 2 things. It's clumsy and it can literally turn into a sort of a balloon. Blowing themselves up helps them survive in the wild. They are inedible when swollen. Well, they're not entirely inedible even when they're deflated. Their poison is over 1,000 times more toxic than cyanide. Don't count on antidotes, they just don't exist. Or probably we need more time to find one. Not only can people become knights, but penguins can do that too. There's one living in Edinburgh, and it was granted knighthood back in 2008. Meet Nils Olaf III, the mascot and colonel-in-chief of the Norwegian King's Guard. So, what size of shoes do you wear? I bet it's way smaller than the size the Statue of Liberty wears. No statue needs shoes, but if the Statue of Liberty wanted to grab a pair of new sneakers, she'd need to look for size 879. No surprise here, she is 151 feet tall. These are our muscles that can cause goosebumps. These tiny fan-shaped muscles are called erector pili, and we have them at the base of every hair follicle. Whenever it's cold, they get contracted, which makes our hairs literally stand up, creating goosebumps. You may think you're not an athlete, but if you've ironed your clothes in very uncomfortable locations at least once, you already are. Well, sort of. Extreme ironing is an extreme sport where people take ironing boards to very unexpected places, such as forests, canoes, or mountains, and iron the clothes there. Some do that even on the top of bronze statues or underwater. And yeah, there are even official championships. Haven't these people heard of permanent press? Rap battles aren't something that appeared recently. In medieval England, there was something called flyting, which was very much like contemporary rap battles. It was quite popular in the 15th and 16th centuries, when two opponents mocked each other in an improvised battle. Tongue map says we have different parts for different tastes. Well, not really. There are individual taste buds that sense certain flavors more than they do with some others, but it doesn't mean one area can taste sweet better than the other. Studies show that all mouth areas have taste buds sensitive to all tastes. Chameleons don't change colors because they want to match their surroundings. That would probably be a very tiring thing to do. In reality, some other things like mood, temperature, or the amount of light they get affect their color. When chameleons relax and stretch cells, crystals that are inside of them are affected by the light. These reptiles use crystals to communicate with each other. So, for example, darker shades show that they're not in such a good mood. It's more like they feel kind of grumpy. Ah, beware the grumpy chameleon. Turkeys can blush just like people do. It works the same way. They blush when angry, excited, or even feel bad. You can see the skin on their necks and heads turn red. Opossums don't really sleep while hanging by their tails. You see that in cartoons and some photos, but in general, they don't. Their tails are strong, so these animals can grip branches and hold their weight, but only for shorter periods. Adults are really too heavy to stay in this position for too long, so they wouldn't get too much rest. So I could say, hanging by their tail overnight is sort of impossible.
There are things about your body you know for sure. Or don't you? Can you guess what exactly is a myth or fact? 1 point is for each correct answer. Let me know your score. Brown eggs are more nutritious than white eggs. Myth or fact? Myth. There is no study saying brown eggs are healthier than white eggs. The only difference is the color of the eggshell. The color of the eggshell doesn't affect its nutrition or quality. That is related to the type of chicken. Chickens with white earlobes tend to have white eggs. Have you heard that a large amount of the dust in your home is actually decanted skin? Not cool, I know. Do you think this is a myth or a fact? This is a myth. You're not just mopping your skin flakes from the floor. Many other components make the house dust. Fibers, hair, building materials, mold, pollen, insect body parts, and ash are some of them, according to the study made in Canadian houses. This makes sense because a house nearby a busy highway or in a renovation area has more dust than a house in the middle of a forest. Skin is our largest organ. Is this a fact or myth? It's a fact. You might think for a second that the intestine can be quite large when you unfold it, but nope. Skin wins the contest. An adult carries around 8 pounds and 22 square feet of skin. Can't think of us without a skin. It's not just there to cover our bodies, it has an essential role in protecting us too. You can't breathe and swallow at the same time. Myth or fact? It's a fact. Maybe you already knew the correct answer, but you tried it anyway after reading this, so see it for yourself. So in your throat, there are 2 passageways important for your survival. I'm putting aside the fancy medical names, and I'll refer to those 2 as airway and food pipe. They prevent breathing and swallowing simultaneously. Otherwise, food would enter the airway and cause severe complications. This doesn't always go as planned. That's why sometimes you end up coughing and preventing the piece of food from reaching the lungs. As well as having unique fingerprints, humans also have unique tongue prints. Is this a myth or fact? Fact! The human tongue is magnificent enough in its features that make us taste the food. It's also unique in its texture. People use biometric systems like fingerprints, voice scans, and iris scans for authentication. They are important to the identification and verification phases. Tongue print is unique, so it's very hard to copy it. It can be used as a biometric system tool too. What if people started using this system in their daily lives for safety reasons? Imagine locking a safe or your phone with a tongue print. An adult spends 3 hours in the bathroom every week. Do you think this is a fact or a myth? It's a fact. A poll by scientists reveals that an average adult spends 3 hours and 9 minutes on the toilet every week. This is more than the time they spent exercising. Take your sweet time. No need to rush. You swallow 8 spiders a year while sleeping. Myth or fact? Don't believe it. Lucky for us, and for the spiders of course, this is not true. Fear no more and have a good night's sleep. Most spiders don't deliberately come near humans. Plus, vibrations coming from a sleeping person might be uncanny for them. Or maybe the spider just lives in the habitat. It thinks that you are flatmates sharing a room. As long as there is actual evidence, I call this a myth. Your thigh bone can resist thousands of pounds of force. Do you think this is a myth or a fact? Yes, this is a fact. People generally refer to it as tight bone, but its actual name is femur bone. This bone is located on the upper part of your leg. Experts say that this bone is hard to break. It's one of the 2 strongest bones in our anatomy. The first one is the temporal bone of the skull. If you wondered about the first one. Anyway, a tight bone can support 30 times more of your body weight. Maybe it's because the femur bone is the longest and largest bone in the human body. Do you believe that shaving your hair makes it grow back thicker? Fact or myth? Watch how I debunk that myth. Experts say shaving doesn't affect the thickness of the hair. The hair's head didn't remove, so the root is still there. You only shave the upper part. After a shave, the hair grows bluntly because it's been cut. That's why you may feel it's getting thicker. It's safe to eat food that's been on the floor for 5 seconds or less. Is this a fact or a myth? Sorry for blocking the best way you justify eating something that fell on the floor. There's no such thing as the 5-second rule. Researchers found that a substantial amount of bacteria transferred to the food within 5 seconds. The moisture of the food directly affects contamination. Imagine you drop a slice of watermelon and chips on the floor. I don't know why you're eating both together or how you end up dropping them both. But let's continue with this example anyway. The watermelon will have more contamination than chips. Because watermelon has more moisture in it. The surface of the watermelon is more open to transferring bacteria. Blondes and redheads may soon disappear. Myth or fact? An easy one, right? This is a myth. Red or blonde-colored hairs are connected to recessive genes. They can be carried from one generation to another without creating the hair color of the carrier. If both parents have the correct recessive genes, the chances are high that the next generation will have blonde or red hair. These genes are rare, but populations still have those genes carried out, so they won't get lost forever. For that to happen, literally everyone on the planet who carries that gene must disappear. So, the chances are low. Drinking coffee dehydrates you. Is it a fact or myth? Myth! You can enjoy your morning coffee. Okay, you may visit the bathroom more frequently after drinking coffee, but it doesn't mean you're losing more water. There are numerous studies made about the effects of caffeine. Some of these studies reveal that drinking a reasonable amount of coffee a day doesn't increase the risk of dehydration. Eating yogurt helps your digestion. Do you think this is a fact or just another myth? A fact, but with the right choice of yogurt. Yogurt is food containing probiotics. They are the good bacteria that make everything flow smoothly in your gut. Eating yogurt alone may not be enough to have a healthy digestive system. It supports the digestive system positively. Keep in mind, though, not all yogurts are equal. Some of them have sugar in them, or they come with toppings like candy or cookies. Go for the classic ones. Your hair will grow faster if you have it cut more often. Fact or myth? We were always told not to cry too much over the hair we lost because it would grow back faster. Unfortunately, the hair growth rate doesn't depend on how often you get a haircut. The average hair growth rate is 0.01 inches per day. Plus, many factors affect it: age, hormones, and even the time of year. Knowing this new fact may make some people postpone their hairdresser appointments. You'd need a drop of liquid, a state-of-the-art laser 3D printer, and a couple of hours of work to make the tiniest fidget spinner ever. Its width will be smaller than that of your hair strand. At least researchers at Oak Ridge National Laboratory managed to do just that. A double-stuffed Oreo cookie aren't double-stuffed, in fact. A math teacher weighed 10 regular Oreos, 10 double-stuffed Oreos, 10 mega-stuffed Oreos. Turns out, double-stuffed Oreos are only 1.86 stuffed Oreos. Chipotle peppers aren't some special type of pepper. They're good old jalapenos. Dried and smoked jalapeno is chipotle. In its gaseous form, oxygen is colorless and doesn't have any odor. But when it's liquid or solid, this substance looks pale blue. After being caught by a black hole, a star gets ripped apart by its enormous gravitational forces. Some parts of the star's remains hurtle into the black hole. The rest, in the form of a huge jet of plasma, is ejected with such force that it travels hundreds of light years away. Not so long ago, scientists decided the dino's family tree had to be redrawn for the first time in 130 years. Apparently, two species of dinosaurs had to be grouped together from the very beginning. Those were the lizard-hipped meat-eaters like T-Rex and bird-hipped vegetarians such as the Stegosaurus. A camel can drink up to 30 gallons of water in a bit more than 10 minutes. This water is stored in the animal's bloodstream. As for its fatty hump, it provides the camel with nourishment when there's little food around. Some sea animals like salmon or turtles use our planet's magnetic field to find their way home. Your lungs not only help you breathe, but they also produce blood cells. These cells are responsible for the clotting which stops bleeding. The lungs make more than 10 million of these tiny cells per hour. Only two letters never appear on the periodic table. Those are J and Q. Spin a ball when you drop it and it'll fly through the air while falling. This phenomenon is known as the Magnus effect. You can see it at work in different sports, for example tennis or baseball. Anatidaephobia is the fear that at any point, somewhere in the world, a duck or a goose may be watching you. The person isn't necessarily afraid that the duck or goose will get close to them or even touch them. They just don't like the feeling of being watched. It was first described in a comic strip to show you how anyone can be afraid of anything. Anything can be a phobia. A duck just watching my every move would certainly give me the heebie-jeebies. I might just quack up. Your favorite fruit candies may be shining because they're covered with carnauba wax. Many fruits, especially apples, have a thin layer of this wax too. Not only can it make the candies and fruit appear glossy, but it also makes your car shine. Peaches and nectarines seem different, but in fact, they're pretty much the same fruit. If the fluffiness gene is dominant, we get peaches. If not, we get smooth nectarines. Crows are pretty good at recognizing people's faces and have been found to remember people for a long time. This could be a good or a bad thing, depending on how nice you are to them. You don't want to come across a crow that's holding a grudge against you. You probably can't tell which crow is which very easily, so it might be better to play it safe and just give them a little wave. In the city of Yoro in Central America, they have an annual event known as the Rain of Fish. Not that the locals get a choice for it anyways. Every year in May or June, a torrential rainstorm rolls through the town, leaving a mass of fish flopping around in the streets. The phenomenon is believed to be caused by waterspouts or water tornadoes, which drop the fish far from their home. Seafood delivery for free? Yes, please. A single strand of spaghetti onto your fork has a name. It's called a spaghetto. In the Italian language, an I at the end of a word means that it's plural, while an O is singular. This goes for all types, like gnocco instead of gnocchi, fettuccino instead of fettuccine, and raviolo for a single parcel of goodness. Water can freeze and boil at the same time. This is called the triple point. That's when a substance can be solid, liquid, and gaseous at the same time. But there's only one pressure temperature that can make it possible. We're used to ranch dressing being white, but in reality, producers usually add titanium dioxide to make it as white as your sunscreen. Oh, sunscreen producers add some titanium dioxide to their products too. Same with Caesar and blue cheese dressings. Our moon used to have an atmosphere. Several volcanic eruptions happened on Earth's natural satellite around 4 billion years ago. They released immense volumes of gas, trillions of tons. It was so much that the gas didn't have enough time to escape into space. That's how an atmosphere was formed. Cold water heats up faster than hot. The speed of this process depends on the temperature difference between the liquid and its surroundings. That's why cold water needs less time to absorb heat, but it doesn't mean it'll boil faster than hot water. Zealandia is a drowned continent in the Pacific Ocean. It's often described as a continental fragment or a microcontinent. Its area is almost 2 million square miles, about half as big as the US. It went underwater about 23 million years ago. New Zealand is Zealandia's largest part that remains above sea level. People are still evolving. Scientists have been tracking several millions of human anomalies. It turns out some harmful genes are slowly but surely getting filtered out of human DNA. Stars look as if they're twinkling because of the turbulence in Earth's atmosphere. It makes the light from the stars move in a different direction before reaching our eyes, and this looks as if the light is shaking. It takes water 1,000 years to complete its continuous journey around the world. The whole process is known as the global ocean conveyor belt. Bismuth is a brittle, shiny white metal with a pink tinge. If you melt it and then let it cool really slowly, it'll form iridescent cubic crystals. Those Skittles and M&M candies are colored with beetles. Red food dye is made of carmine, which is made with cochineal beetles. Red lipsticks are made with these beetles too. The rocks, metals, and other minerals and things that make up the planet are packed into the ground more tightly in certain places than in others. This has surprising consequences. Gravity varies slightly depending on where you are. How high up you are also has an effect, so if you're at the top of Mount Everest, you'd also weigh slightly less. Don't look down. One scientist has a theory that a substance existed in ancient microbes before chlorophyll, that's the thing that makes plants green, evolved on Earth. This substance reflected sunlight as red and violet colors, which combined to make purple. If true, the young Earth may have been teeming with strange, purple-colored critters before all the green stuff appeared. Apples taste better when they're sliced because they're exposed to oxygen. It activates the enzyme called polyphenol oxidase, responsible for ripening and visible browning. The same thing happens when you hit an apple. The oxygen enters the apple through tiny cracks and it starts to ripen. Are you into white chocolate? Well, it's actually not even close to real chocolate. It's basically a mixture of sugar, milk, vanilla, and cocoa butter. Cocoa butter isn't enough for chocolate. It should contain chocolate liquor or powder. The only product that never expires, even if you don't store it in the fridge, is honey. It has a low pH and lots of sugar. That's why organisms that cause spoiling can't live in honey. If two pieces of the same kind of metal touch in space, they bond and get stuck together. It doesn't happen on Earth because water and air keeps pieces apart. People are more honest when they're tired. That's why most confessions are made during late-night conversations. Firefighters usually extinguish flames with wet water. It's water mixed with special wetting agents. These are chemicals that help water soak into objects and spread everywhere more easily. The Sun is an average-sized star, and still it could fit 1,300,000 Earths. The star is also 333,000 times as heavy as our planet. People have been able to spell their emails in Morse code since 2004. That's when a new symbol, "at" was added to the code for the first time. The character is actually called a comet and consists of the A and C signals with no break in between. The Empire State Building's tower was designed to serve as a docking station for dirigibles. At that time, people believed that these airships would become the main means of transportation in the future. The project included gangplanks, check-in and customs offices, and so on. But then the engineers realized that the wind up there was too strong for their plans, and they gave up on their idea. Angel Falls, the largest uninterrupted waterfall on the planet, is more than twice as tall as the Empire State Building. During the dry season, the falling water sometimes evaporates before it reaches the ground. One of the most mysterious sounds ever heard on Earth was the bloop. It occurred in 1997 and resembled the noise of marine animals, but the volume was too great for a sound produced by a living creature. The bloop continued for 1 minute. It started from a low rumble and then rose in frequency. Antarctica might just look like a giant field of ice, but there's actually a huge continent underneath. That means that it has volcanoes, mountains, and valleys, like any other continent. Scientists have recently discovered that the Antarctic landmass has the lowest point on the planet, as well as huge mountain ranges. If any of the numerous volcanoes were to erupt, it would melt a huge part of the surface ice and increase the spill of ice into the ocean. The sea level would rise and flood coastal areas around the world. The ocean waters would also be disrupted, putting marine life at risk, though all of these volcanoes are dormant at the moment. Each day on the South Pole lasts 6 months on this continent. The South Pole only has a single sunset and sunrise across an entire year. Early Earth might have been purple, not green. There's a theory that ancient microbes used molecules rather than chlorophyll to absorb sunlight. These molecules likely gave living organisms a violet tint. During the Stone Age, the entire population of Central Europe was around 1,500 people, which means they would all fit on a mid-sized cruise liner these days. Astronomers have figured out that the Milky Way weighs around 1.5 trillion solar masses, and one solar mass is the mass of our Sun. A tiny part of this weight is a supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy, and 200 billion stars. The rest is dark matter, mysterious and invisible. If all sheets of Arctic ice and glaciers melted at the same time, the sea level would rise for the height of a 26-story building. Under black or UV light, ripening bananas look bright blue. That's because of the chlorophyll that's breaking down when the fruit is ripening. Because of tectonic plate movements, the Pacific Ocean shrinks every year, and the Atlantic Ocean gets bigger by the same amount. These days, there are only 2 ice sheets in the world left after the planet's last ice age. The first is the Greenland ice sheet. The second, the Antarctic ice sheet, is enormous. It's the size of Mexico and the continental US combined. Tsunami waves often go unnoticed. They don't rise for more than several inches above the surface until they reach shallow waters. When the ocean is deep, though, they can travel as fast as a long-distance passenger airplane. Corals that live in shallow waters produce their own protection from the sun. Without it, sunlight would harm the algae living inside them. To protect these algae, which are the main source of food for the corals, they fluoresce. This process makes proteins that act as sunscreen. Almost 90% of the volcanic activity on Earth happens in the oceans. The South Pacific has the largest concentration of volcanoes people know about. There's one volcano cluster that has 1,133 volcanic cones. All of them are active and cooped up in an area the size of New York State. The Zemchug Canyon in the middle of the Bering Sea is the largest underwater canyon ever discovered. There are more treasures and artifacts at the bottom of the ocean than in all museums in the world combined. In 1900, one of the biggest hurricanes struck near Central America and in the Gulf of Mexico. It then went as far as Florida and Texas and is considered to be the most devastating hurricane in the United States history. They first detected it on August 27th, and it lasted for many days. By the time it reached the Texas coast, the storm had turned into a Category 4 hurricane. Hurricanes are categorized on wind speed and intensity using something called a Saffir-Simpson scale. There are 5 different categories from 1 to 5, with 1 being the weakest and 5 being the strongest. The people of Galveston had less than 4 days to prepare for the arriving storm that even stretched out to Oklahoma and Kansas. The Great Hurricane then made its way to the Great Plains and turned towards the Great Lakes, New England, and reached southeastern Canada. The storm was so bad that more than 3,600 homes were damaged, even though they were sturdy enough to withstand the storm. Given the population numbers back then, it was equivalent to hundreds of thousands of houses destroyed, if not millions. Spotted Lake, Canada. They call it the most magical spot in Canada. In winter and spring, this is just a regular lake that looks like any other, but try going there in the summer when the water starts to evaporate. It'll feel as if you've entered a different world, a polka-dotted landscape with blue, green, and yellow spots. Over the summer, there are over 300 pools there, and they all look magical. Over the centuries, people believed each of them had different healing properties. Oh, and the explanation for the vibrant colors is pure science. Each of them has a high concentration of different minerals. We live inside the sun. Its atmosphere stretches far beyond its visible surface, and even though Earth is 93 million miles away from the star, it's still within reach of the sun's atmosphere. Auroras happen when charged particles from the sun get caught by Earth's magnetic field and crash into the upper atmosphere near the poles. Our planet is gradually slowing down the speed of its rotation. It happens at an unhurried pace of 17 milliseconds per 100 years. Because of this, our days are becoming longer, and still, only after 140 million years, a day on Earth will last 25 hours. Earth's southernmost continent, Antarctica, is only the 5th largest one, but it contains almost 70% of the planet's fresh water and 90% of the world's ice. Antarctica is also considered to be a desert. Lots of rocks on Earth have a Martian origin. Scientists analyze the chemical content of some meteorites found in the Sahara Desert, Antarctica, and other places. It turned out that these rocks had arrived from the Red Planet. The largest sandcastle in the world is located in Denmark. 30 sand sculptors who created it used more than 5,000 tons of sand. To make it more durable, they added 10% of clay, together with a layer of glue. They built it to stand tall against long and stormy winters. Some photons that don't get absorbed are re-emitted, and their wavelength determines the color we see. When you expose a material to sunlight or photons of higher energy, it can damage its chromophores, which is why they won't be able to emit photons at certain wavelengths. Red materials fade in sunlight the most. Their chromophores emit red light in a way they mop up photons of the rest of the wavelengths. From 60 to 100 tons of space dust drift down to our planet's surface every day. These tiny cosmic particles are mostly released by comets, which are usually made of dust and ice. When the sun turns this ice into vapor, the remaining dust travels down to Earth. There are 2 sides to every story. Just like to a regular cotton pad, 2 different textures to be more precise. One is smooth, and you're supposed to use it for more sensitive areas of your face, for example, the eyes. The rougher side can help you remove makeup and clean your face in less sensitive areas, like the forehead. If you like having greenery in your home, you've probably noticed the flower pots have holes at the bottom. These holes are the reason your green friends live a happy life. They're extremely important for water drainage. Thanks to these holes, you'll avoid stagnant water buildup that can eventually ruin your plant. Also, thanks to those holes, roots can grow and expand beyond the limits of your pot. Have you noticed aviator sunglasses mostly have green lenses? It has something to do with their origin. First, they showed up in the 1930s. Before that, pilots had goggles to protect their eyes while they were in the air. High altitudes with glaring sun and sub-zero temperatures were a real test for their eyes. The goggles helped them with those issues, but there was another one. Since the temperature differences between the air outside and within the goggles were big, the lenses would fog up and obscure the pilot's view. So the company Bausch & Lomb came up with teardrop lenses surrounded by a light metal frame. These lenses were dark green because this tint cuts out blue light, which is also a problem for pilots when they're flying above the cloud line. Plus, green lenses also reduce glare and improve contrast and sharpness. Holes in the side of your Converse sneakers? Are those really necessary? Well, they allow air to enter your shoe so your feet can stay cool. You can also use them to style up your shoes and tie them in different ways too. There are 2 reasons plastic bottles have grooves. First, if you're drinking cold water and it's hot outside, you'll see there's a lot of condensation on your bottle. Or maybe if you're playing some sport or working out. Your hands are sweaty, and if a bottle had a smooth surface, it would be more difficult to grip it, so the ridges are there to improve your hand grip. The second reason is that because of these ridges, manufacturers can use thinner plastic. That means they need less material in overall production. And that plastic is still firm enough for the bottle to maintain its shape. Wooden coat hangers are not just there to look nice. Since they're made of cedar wood, they bring a nice scent to your closet. Plus, they repel bugs. They're also quite firm, so they come in handy for heavy clothes, such as jackets. And it's hard to damage them. So, they'll serve you longer. You may have noticed there's a colored square at the bottom of your toothpaste. These blocks mostly come in blue, red, green, and black. They are some sort of eye marks, since they help manufacturing machines at the assembly line recognize where and when to cut the toothpaste and seal the end of the tube. Some boots have loops at their top and back. Looks like a fashion statement, doesn't it? Or maybe it's something that manufacturers add for fun. But those loops actually have their purpose. With them, you can pull the shoe up when trying to wear it. Plus, you can easily hang them or use the loop for better support for the laces. Confession time. Remember those attachments your vacuum cleaner came with? Did you also put them somewhere aside and never use them again? They're actually pretty helpful when you're cleaning the house because you can use them for particular areas that are sometimes hard to reach with the regular attachment. We all know what the vegetable peeler is for, but besides peeling the skin of carrots or potatoes, you can use it for onions too. It may be faster than doing it with a knife, plus it will save you some onion tears. Some sweatshirts have something pretty specific in the neck area. A V-shaped stitch you can see in the middle of the collar. The ribbed insert, similar to the ribbing at the hem and the sleeves, would allow the owner to put the garment on more easily, and it wouldn't even lose shape. The V insert would stretch, so a person wearing the sweatshirt could get their head through the neck. Its purpose was also to absorb sweat. In its early versions, sweatshirts had both the back and the front of the collars. Through time, they lost the back one, and this V insert became something decorative since manufacturers started to stitch a V at the collar without using the ribbed material they had added before. Brightly colored squares or circles you see on food packages aren't an indication of vitamins, minerals, or certain flavors that food contains. And nope, it's not some secret code consumers are supposed to crack. It's actually for printing engineers. They're called process control patches or printer's color blocks. During the process of printing the food packaging, manufacturers use those colored blocks to check if the printing ink is correct. They compare the color of blocks they print to make sure the brand they print for has a consistent and recognizable quality all over the world. The majority of printers only use 4 colors: yellow, magenta, cyan, and black. Some printers have additional colors, such as green, orange, and violet. That's why you sometimes see multiple circles on certain packages. They test each ink color. Margins in notebooks. They're not there as some sort of a guide for taking notes and writing. Someone came up with a potential solution that was supposed to protect the written work from, well, rats. They used to be pretty common residents in people's homes. They are known for their diet, including basically anything, like paper, for example. So, people started adding wide margins as an appetizer that was supposed to keep rats full. This way, they wouldn't want to get to the main dish, the written pages. Suits have a buttonhole close to the top of the lapel, Manufacturers sew it shut so you can't open it without ruining your suit. And when you compare it to the other lapel, you see that one is completely smooth, without any clues. You won't find such an unpartnered buttonhole on a suit jacket only. Camp shirts, pea coats, and some other clothing pieces have them too. And they have to do with the history of lapels. The earliest ones showed up at the beginning of the 19th century. Before this, men mostly wear frocks with high collars. They would button them all the way up to the top. During hot days, they would relax the button stance, turn down the collars, and leave the top button undone. It was a relief from the swelter, plus their folded over laps would be symmetrical at the chest, and today, we recognize that as a lapel. People stopped using that buttonhole after they came up with the lapel, unless it was for some formal occasion. Like for example, when you wanted to put a flower in there. That's why suit makers left it, as a fashion feature. Tea bags. It's pretty easy to guess what they're for, but they come in handy if you have smelly feet after a long day in your shoes. Just pop tea bags, unused of course, in your shoes during the night. By the time you wake up, tea bags are going to effectively absorb all the unwanted odors. Binder clips can also have a helpful purpose besides their main one. You can clip your money to keep it together. Same is true for paper clips. If your favorite bracelet broke and you're looking for a way to hold it on, a paper clip might help. Just hook one through each end of the bracelet, twist it tightly, and your bracelet is good to go.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on